Hello everyone, we're on chapter 7 and we're on paragraph 4. The metaphysical realist is faced by a further difficulty when he seeks to explain the similarity between the world pictures of a different human individual. He has to ask himself, how is it that the picture of the world which I build up out of my subjectively determined percepts and my concepts turns out to be the same as the one which another individual is also building up out of the same two subjective factors? How can I, in any case, draw conclusions from my own subjective picture of the world about that of another human being? The fact that people can understand and get on with one another in practical life leads the metaphysical realist to conclude that their subjective world pictures must be similar. From the similarity of these world pictures, he then further concludes that the individual spirits behind the single human subjects as percepts, or the I in itself behind the subjects, must also be like one another. And we have 34 summarized as follows. The metaphysical realist is faced with another difficulty when he seeks to explain the similarity between the world pictures of different human individuals. The fact that people can understand and get on with others in practical life leads the metaphysical realist to conclude that their subjective world pictures must be similar. So this paragraph, for the what Steiner is saying is that the metaphysical realists believe that because everyone's percepts are subjective, we'll never be able to understand the world, and they believe, everyone is perceiving all these different things, and they don't really see the same things, I guess, and it will never truly know objects in the world, and that's a limit to knowledge that they're setting up. But what Steiner's pointing out that they need to ask themselves is, why is it that my percepts and my concepts are similar to someone else's percepts and concepts? I mean, that has to mean something. And also, too, that we can understand each other in this world. We can get along. I can go to a store, I can buy a shirt, I can understand what the retail person is saying. Like if we talk about the color of the shirt, they can understand what I'm saying, they can see what I'm saying. So how can we have this understanding? It's kind of showing that it doesn't really, to say that yes, our percepts are subjectively determined, but at the same time it's pointing out that there is a similarity, and that means something, that I can sort of, my subjective percepts are also being perceived by someone else. So it doesn't seem like maybe percepts aren't as subjective as these people believe. So we're going to go on to 35. This is an inference from a sum of effects to the character of the underlying causes. We believe that we can understand the situation well enough from a sufficiently large number of instances to know how the inferred causes will behave in other instances. Such an inference is called an inductive inference. We shall be obliged to modify its results if further observation yields some unexpected element, because the character of our conclusion is, after all, determined only by the particular form of our actual observations. The metaphysical realist asserts that this knowledge of causes, though conditional, is nevertheless quite sufficient for practical life. And 35 is summarized as follows. An inductive inference drawn by metaphysical realists is that because of the similarity of people's subjective world pictures, that is, because people can get along in practical life, the individual spirits behind the single human subjects as percepts, or the I in itself behind the subject, must be like one another. Okay, so in this paragraph, Steiner is pointing out that in paragraph 34, that the metaphysical realists are using inductive inference to come to their conclusions. And in paragraph 34, he says the inference is what he says based on 34 is, the fact that people can understand and get on with one another in practical life leads the metaphysical realist to conclude that their subjective world pictures must be similar. From the similarity of these world pictures, he then further concludes that the individual spirits behind the single human subjects as percepts, or the I in itself behind the subjects, must also be like one another. And that is the first point is acceptable, but to come to the second point, to say that the individual spirits must be like one another, is quite an inference, and that's what he's pointing out here. And he's also pointing out that the metaphysical realist asserts that this knowledge of causes is sufficient for practical life. So we are going to move on to paragraph 36. Inductive inference is a method underlying modern metaphysical realism. At one time, it was thought that we could evolve something out of concepts that is no longer a concept. It was thought that the metaphysical realities, which metaphysical realism after all requires, could be known by means of concepts. This kind of philosophizing is now out of date. Instead, it is thought that one can infer from a sufficiently large number of perceptual facts the character of the thing in itself, which underlies these facts. Whereas formerly it was from concepts, now it is from percepts that people seek to evolve the metaphysical. Since one has concepts before oneself in transparent clearness, it was thought that one might be able to deduce the metaphysical from them with absolute certainty. Percepts are not given with the same transparent clearness. Each subsequent one is a little different from others of the same kind which preceded it. Basically, therefore, anything inferred from past percepts will be somewhat modified by each subsequent percept. The character of the metaphysical thus obtained can therefore be only relatively true, since it is subject to correction by further instances. Edward von Hartmann's metaphysics has a character determined by this basic method, as expressed in the motto on the title page of his first important book, Speculative Results Following the Inductive Method of Natural Science. And 36 is summarized as follows. Excuse me. 36 is summarized as follows. The method underlying metaphysical realism is inductive inference. This method can only be relatively true, since it is subject to correction by further instances. One of the main points he points out in this paragraph is that obviously inductive inference is sort of the technique that metaphysical realism gets their theories on things, and they believe that one can infer from a sufficiently large number of perceptual facts the character of the thing in itself, which underlies these facts. And then he continues to point out that the character of the metaphysical is thus obtained, can only be relatively true, since it is subject to correction by further instances. Okay, so they used to derive their theories and whatnot, the metaphysical, from concepts, but now they've moved into percepts, and as a result, they're always going to have things being modified. Anything that's inferred from the past percepts are going to be modified by each new percept. I'm going to talk more about this in my next session, but the next paragraph kind of sums it up a little more better, so I'm not going to really go too much into it. So if you have any questions or comments, just send me a message. I look forward to seeing you all again next time. Bye.